Hey everyone, it's Sam. Today we're going to talk about building interactive UIs with Rails using Hotwire, which includes Turbo and Stimulus. We're going to go over Turbo Frames, Turbo Streams, Turbo Drive a little bit, as well as using Stimulus to layer on some interactivity, and it allows us to write a little vanilla JavaScript in a nice way. So let's check it out. So I built this little app as a example of what we are going to build and some interactivity that I think is pretty normal in a modern application. So basically it's just a deep work log. I wanted to create 90-minute work sessions that I can just keep notes of, and then when they're done, they'll just show up down here. So all you have to do is click on Start 90-minute session, opens up this editor. I can say like, what am I working on? And that's doing this video. As you can see, this is updating the words. So it's saving the background. The time is updating. We have this little countdown timer. And all of this is being persisted to the back end. So like if I reload this, it's still saved. And when I hit end, it pops up here down at the bottom. And the words are updated, the time's updated. And as you can see, no browser refreshes happen, no hard page transitions. But when we hit start, you can see that the URL gets updated up here to the edit, and it allows us to go back and forth using the browser toggle. Currently, the back will automatically send us back here because I have it set up so that if there's an active session, when I load the first page, it comes to this edit page. So then we can just end this again, and you can see that it pops up just as before, and this gives us like a little duration. So that's the app that we're going to build. Right now it has everything that we want. It's using Turbo frames, streams, it's using WebSockets, but what we're going to do is start from the beginning, just plain HTML, no Turbo, no nothing, and then we're going to layer on Turbo, and you can see sort of how you build it up from the ground. So let's check out the code, and I'm going to remove all the Turbo stuff, and then you're going to look at the code, and we're going to add it together. Let's do that. Okay, so let's check out the code a little bit. This is just vanilla Rails. It has no Turbo anything. It's just HTML, HTTP requests, because what you want to do is start from that ground level so that you can just add things on as you go, as you need them. Because honestly, you can get a long way without adding any Turbo interactions at all, and the HTML works nicely, and then you can add on little things to make it feel more interactive, like we just saw. For right now, everything is going through this index action, which just is the beginning. Active just sees if there's a log entry that hasn't ended yet. If it hasn't ended yet, then I want to go to edit that one. And if not, we'll create a new log entry so that we can create when we hit that button, we can create a new one. So we can just check out this. Let's check out the layout here first. So we just have the stats. We have the stats at the top, which we can see is this, which is pretty straightforward. It just has the total word count, all the words that we've ever written for our log entry. And then we have like the duration that we spent today. So that's stats. Nothing special about this. It's all just regular ERB. And then we have this log entries all, because on every page, even the edit page, I want to see all the log entries at the bottom, just for reference and things. So for the index page, we can look at the index page here. All we do is just have a normal form here, which just creates on submit. It creates a new entry, which we have seen inside of the controller. create, and then it redirects to the edit page. And this just is a regular old edit page, has the time remaining, and has like a form with the text area, etc. So if we look at this, and I just want to point something out here, you can turn off Turbo Drive here, which is false. So what is Turbo Drive? I'm just going to show you, it's just setting it false here to turn everything off, and I'm going to explain it to you in 1 second. So if you go back to this page, we see where it looks the same since it's all the same HTML components. But when we hit this start button, you can see that it refreshes the page and does like a normal navigation, browser navigation. It reloads the entire page. And the same thing when we end the session, it reloads, it goes back to this and reloads the page. And everything only gets updated once we reload, so it's not very interactive, but it does work. So that means like you want the application to work normally without having all of these things on top. So what is Turbo Drive? So Turbo Drive, let's think about a web page like this. Turbo Drive allows us to, instead of having, when we hit like the button, when we hit the create button, it's going to navigate to the next page, right? And then that will show us the text field, and then it'll show us all of the log entries down here. So what it's going to do is reload all of that. It's going to reload the entire page. It's going to redraw everything into this new context here, which means it'll reload any external JavaScript, CSS, etc. What Turbo Drive does is it takes any form submissions or links, and it fetches the HTML, and then it just replaces it on the same existing page that you already have. Now, that gives you a little bit of interactivity, and it makes it feel smoother, and it makes it faster. But it's sort of a one-size-fits-all solution, and it doesn't allow you to break things up into individual sections. So let's just see how that works real fast. So if we go back to this and we turn on Turbo Drive true, or you can just delete this because the default is also to use Turbo Drive. So let's refresh this page. And then you can see once you hit that button, it doesn't refresh the page at all. It works the way that it was working before, the one I was showing you, where it just reloads the HTML inside of the page. The problem is it's refreshing the entire page. We don't need it to refresh all of these log entries down here. And that's where frames come in. This is using Turbo Drive. And I think sometimes it's hard to think about how is all of this stuff working, what's being redrawn, etc. So what I do is I have a little hack that I borrowed over the years using CSS, but I added a little animation here. So anytime a new element gets added to the page, it flashes red. And that makes it so we can tell what's being redrawn and what is not being redrawn. So let's go back here and let's check it out. Just so you know, adding these animations to every element on the page is really going to slow it down. So this is just for debugging. Obviously, you don't want to do this in production, but it's really helpful to see how everything works. So we can see that everything is being reloaded. Everything is being rendered on page load. Let's start this. And everything's rendered again because Turbo Drive is all about an entire page. But what we really want to do is not have the entire page. What we really want to do is, let's zoom out here. Really want to do is divide the page into individual frames. So we can think about the page as individual sections. And so for us, like we have this stats section here at the top. Gigantic, and this is extremely tiny, so sorry about that. Let me just make this bigger. So we have the stats section right here, and then we have sort of this active section in the middle, which is where like the active log or the create button sits. And then at the bottom, we have the log entries. And so really, when we're moving between active log and create and active log, we don't need to mess with log entries. And really, when we're done with the log session, all we want to do is add it to the top of this, which is going to be turbo streams, which we'll see later. But when we update the button, when we click the button to create a new session, we really want to replace this entire thing. So that's where turbo frames come into play. So we can make each individual one of these a turbo frame, and that'll help us out. But what is a turbo frame? Okay, turbo frames, you can think about turbo frames as being little individual boxes. Basically, they're sort of like iframes in a way, but they're not sandboxed like that. But what they are is they are a little section of your application where when you wrap it in the turbo frame tag, anytime you click a link or anytime you submit a form inside of that, it's going to send the request, but it's going to capture that turbo frame, and then it's going to expect that the response has that ID, turbo frame ID. So all it's going to do is swap that. So it's going to send, so if we have a turbo frame, and I'll show you an example obviously, but if we have a turbo frame called active log, we have the button inside, we click it, it's going to send the request to the server. The server is going to respond with some HTML that has that turbo frame with the ID, and it's just going to swap that out. And that's going to show us, how turbo frames work, and it's going to save us from doing that whole page refresh, as we can see here. So let's see how that works. Okay, so let's jump back into this and turn this into a turbo frame. You can check out the Rails helpers here, Turbo Rails, and you can check out the Frames helper, and you can see a little bit more about what you can do with it. We'll jump into a little bit more later with the loading, lazy loading, and things like that. But right now, all we need to do is just add an ID. So we're going to do turbo. We're just going to call this active entry, and end this, and then what we want it to be replaced with is the edit. So let's go to the edit, and add this for the active entry. Let's do that. And now we have two turbo frames for active entry, the list and the edit. And basically what we want to do is when we click the create, sorry, this isn't the list, this is the create. When we hit create, we want the create to be swapped with the edit for the active area that we have here, that we've created. There's a bunch of different ways you could do this, but I like to think about it in like the sections of the application that I'm building. To me, this is like the active area, and so I just call it active entry. So let's reload the page. So when we hit this start 90-minute session, you can see that nothing else turns red. Only this portion turns red, which means that these entries weren't reloaded again, which is great, especially if maybe this takes a long time. We're going to put some sleeps in here later, and I can show you what it looks like if it slows down. But that's going to make it a lot smoother because you're only redrawing like a certain section of the page. And again, we hit save, and then that's the only thing that's updated again. But as you notice, since the full page wasn't redrawn, the new entry wasn't added here because the entries weren't redrawn as well as they would if it was just pure Turbo Drive. So what we're going to do is add a stream, and a Turbo stream allows you to, you can see it pops up here. A Turbo stream allows you to do specific actions like append to a list or prepend to a list is what we want because we want it to show up at the beginning, and or replace. And what we're going to want to do is replace these stats as we're updating our session. And then we're going to want to prepend onto this list for every time that we update this. So there's a few ways you could do this. You could redraw the whole page again, but really we don't want to have to query all of these lists again. We really just want to add this new element. So you can think about Turbo streams as actions, basically. Turbo actions would probably be a better name for them. But turbo actions actually have a different meaning. And so let's talk about that meaning real fast. As you can see, when we hit this edit, it doesn't update this URL, which isn't good for the user because the back functionality, etc., front, forward, doesn't work the way that they would expect it to. So what we want to do is add this data attribute called turbo action, and there's two that you can use. You can either use advance, which moves it forward, which means it like pushes it onto the stack, and then there's replace, which basically means it pops the current thing off of the stack and pushes this on, or replaces the current element on the stack with this one. We want advance so that we can go backwards. So let's do that. Start over this again. End the session. And see, this doesn't update again either. So let's reload the original page, then we do this. Now it's updating this correctly, which is exactly what we want. And then we also want to do it for the edit page. So let's go down here. And where is that? Is that on form? Let's submit. Yeah, let's do it on the submit. And we just pop it in here. And now when we do this, and we say, it recreates the URL correctly. And that is turbo actions. But turbo streams actually do a lot of actions, so it's sort of confusing. So let's work on getting it so that it automatically appends this entry to the top of the list. So what we can do here is we have to think about, what do we want? We want a WebSocket connection so that when you don't have to use WebSockets, you could use HTML here, but I want to show how it works with WebSockets. So using action cable, you want to create a WebSocket that carries streams, stream actions, so that as the stream actions come, then it does something to the screen. It replaces, it prepends, it appends, like we talked about before. So what we want to do is let's check out the log list entry, which is what we have here. All. Oops, I already have the turbo stream there. It's fine. We'll reuse it. So we have this stream, and there's just this little tag, turbo stream 4. You can check out the helpers here. This little directory. You can also look at the documentation, but I just sort of like looking at it in GitHub for whatever reason. So we can look at the streams header, and we can look at the streams from, or stream from, and we can see sort of some of the examples. Basically, you can add a lot of identifiers to this and make it really specific, but I'm trying to show you like the most basic thing just to get you started. And as you need more stuff, then you look it up, then you add it. Don't try to be too clever at the beginning because it sort of hurts the application as you go. Just add every little thing that you need. So right now, all we need is something that just says log entries stream. That's what we're going to call it, log entry stream. And that's pretty easy. And so what we want to do is every time a log entry is saved or ended, we're going to call it ended, we want it to broadcast to the stream. Broadcast means basically just send the message to this stream, to this channel. So let's say we want to, so I have this callback called prepend if ended. So after save, we want to check prepend if ended. So I have this field called ended at, which just is updated for when a session has been completed. So when the session is completed, the ended at timestamp is set. So if we're saving a change to the ended at and ended at exists, it's not nil, we want to broadcast a prepend to log entries stream. That's what we called this before, log entry stream. Target is log entries. Target is just going to be the ID of the HTML element that you're using. I'm calling this log entries. So the target is log entries. You might think like, how does it know what template to use? So since it's Rails and we have the configuration, convention over configuration situation, it uses automatically the log entry template that I think you're all familiar with, but is used for when we want to render a model. So this is just the rendering of the model. So all it's going to do is wrap that in a stream. Well, I'll show it to you in the network tab, and it'll be easier to see. But all it's going to do is wrap this entry into a turbo stream element, and it's going to give it the action prepend, and prepend is going to add it to the beginning. So I'm gonna show you this one later, but right now we're doing this prepend if needed. So hopefully when it saves, it should prepend it to the top of the list, and we'll see it in red, obviously. So let's start over again. So let's add a session. Should be prepended. And you can see right there, it's prepended. Now, you might think like, okay, how does that work? What does that look like? Let's go to the network tab and let's look at the WebSocket. And you can see the WebSocket messages here, obviously. And it's a little hard to read here. Make this bigger. Actually, I'm going to copy this message here. And let's scratch buffer here. And you can see that what the turbo stream does here. The turbo stream wraps it in this prepend action, prepend like we said, target log entries, which is just the ID, template, all of the HTML needs to be wrapped in this template, and it has everything that we need rendered exactly from that component that we had here. So you remember this, you can see that it's sent exactly like this. So it's all just using the existing templates and everything that you would already be using, which is amazing and really great for reusability. And so the beauty of it too is, while it may seem like we're doing some complicated interactions with the WebSockets, if you reload the page, it's not like any state needs to be recalculated, because the state is automatically already what it is because we started from the HTML. If you start from the HTML and layer things on, it's really easy to have something that's understandable for the user, and you don't get into these weird states because we're really just doing HTML actions and we're adding things to make it like just a little bit nicer to use. So that's what turbo streams are. And so for turbo streams, I have this one that updates the stats after save, and it's very similar. Just see if there's anything that's changed to the content. If so, send a replace to the stats stream in the stats page. So let's go to the application, and you can do this in the layout if you want. You can do this, you can put these little streams wherever you'd like them to be. Just make sure that they're rendered during the page load. Let's do a turbo stream for stats. I believe it's called stats. Is that what it's called? Stats stream. And let's just put it up here by this. Since stats is just a partial, we could do the same thing with log entries. I just don't want to recreate the stream tag inside. So when you're sending the updates, I don't want to actually, create too many streams at once. So we could add the stream here for the logs, but I just thought it'd be easier to show in there. But for stats, we're reusing this stats partial, and we want that stats partial to be replaced. So I'm going to put the stream outside of the partial so that it's not, so there's just not anything funky happening. And I just think it's easier to reason about that way. So we have the stats stream set up, and that means that when we're doing things like, this should add 2 words to this, and it does. That's a basic overview of how Turbo works. We're going to get into how Stimulus works in the next video that I'll release in a few days. So thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed it, please subscribe. Thanks.